All right. I hope everyone enjoyed that really awesome intro song from AC/DC. I'm so happy to be hosting this webinar on behalf of Rattle. So I'll quickly introduce myself, and then Mark, I'll throw it over to you to introduce yourself. But to everyone joining us on this webinar today, thank you for joining us. I know there was probably hundreds, thousands of webinars but you could have joined, but you chose to join this one. So thank you very much. By way of introduction, my name is Tom Cherian. I am the Director of Revenue Enablement here at Rattle. And on that note, Mark, I'll throw it over to you. Introduce yourself. Why don't you tell us where you're from, how long you've been with Abnormal, and any other history and background you'd really like to share about yourself, because really it's more about you than us, believe it or not.
Oh, thanks, Tom. Appreciate it. My name's Mark Gremban. I live in San Jose, California. I am the Director of Sales Operations at Abnormal Security. I've been at Abnormal for a little over 2 years, but I've been in sales operations for over 10 years. Wow. I started my career actually selling insurance, where I quickly found a passion for the process and analytics side of managing my book of business. And in my career, I've done everything from, sales support, deals desk management, systems administration, and strategy and analytics. Really happy to be here. Thanks, Tom.
Yeah. And look, I also just want to shout you out, because there's not a lot of leaders, especially on the support side, like in ops or enablement, that actually have gone through the pain and suffering and joy of sales. So the fact that you did it firsthand, and probably in one of the toughest industries to do it, because literally everybody has insurance. And yes. So you're trying to displace that other vendor to sell that prospect your insurance with your unique value proposition. It speaks volumes. And I'm sure that also shows to your reps, the ones that you're truly supporting, the empathy.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. And that's really important to empathize with everything that they're going through.
Awesome. Well, Mark, thank you so much for joining us today. And I think the best way to maybe set the stage is let's just talk about the agenda. And then right after, or while we're talking about the agenda, if everyone could just get their phone ready, because we're going to do a quick live poll through Slido. But what I thought would be helpful today is let's just talk about the current state of enablement. Not my opinion, not my perspective, but Mark, what's the current state of enablement within your company, within Abnormal, or maybe what you're seeing within the industry, the good, the bad, and the ugly. And from there, we'll talk about hey, there must be a better way. So what is that better way? And that better way via Rattle. And this whole philosophy around not just reacting to what our reps need and then delivering the enablement, but how do we proactively deliver enablement when the reps actually need it, even before they realize that they need it, right? I think this is the ultimate future state that I think every company, that every enablement or ops leader wants to essentially get to. So how do you actually do that? What's that blueprint look like? What does that experience look like? And then some tips and tricks to getting started. So whip out your phones, whip out your iPad. If you don't have one, steal one from your neighbor, steal one from your partner. If you're working from home, steal one from your kids, scan the QR code. And if you could just share in a few words, or even in one word, what are some of the top struggles you have in enablement? I think it'd be interesting to see what is the community actually seeing? While we're waiting for some folks to share, I mean, Mark, I think just off the bat, do you have any struggles that you're currently seeing as it relates to enablement?
Yeah, sure. I'd say first, being in sales ops, I have a very ops-minded perspective of enablement. For me, one of the key objectives is to create a well-defined, repeatable sales process, and then train our AEs on that process so they just never miss a beat, right? Yeah. For me, one of the top struggles has been setting the appropriate expectations. And what do I mean by that? People generally want to do the right thing, in my opinion. When I talk to our sellers, they really want to know that they want to do the right thing, but they just don't know what to do. And so for me, it's how do we surface enablement content so our people, our sales reps, have what they need when they need it, and they know how to, or we know how to prioritize, how to train them.
Yeah. Is there anything here that we're seeing in this beautiful word cloud? And I just love it. It's kind of like changing shape as we have been talking, but is there anything here that's screaming at you that you can relate with? There's definitely a few here that's screaming at me, but I'll let you take a first stab at it.
Yeah, it's hard not to call out the elephant in the room there with data hygiene.
Yeah,
that's something that we deal with on a day-by-day basis. And again, for me, the sellers, they want to know what needs to be done. And if you tell them what to do, they'll get it done. And so just finding the right ways to surface that to them when it's relevant and when they're working on that, I think you're going to have more success in that area.
Yeah. I think the big one for me is adherence, being an enablement leader. I think despite all the content and all the training in the world, right? Sometimes, or maybe even a lot of times, right? Like reps are not necessarily following the process, right? So for example, like the thing that always screams at me, and I know this was like a pain, especially in the last few companies I worked at, where customer success, general best practice, like start the renewal process 90 days in advance. Not 30 days or 15 days before the renewal, because you're literally asking for churn, but please adhere to the process. Start 90 days in advance. Any other things here that you're seeing as a struggle that you can relate with or want to call out?
I'm sure a lot of these, would be something that I can relate to. I see scaling in there. Abnormal was in a pretty unique situation, over the last couple of years, and we actually tripled our sales team 2 years in a row. And so you can imagine how many sellers are coming in, and you have your initial onboarding, right? But if anybody's like me out there, I might take in like 10% of what's being said in that initial onboarding. And so I think it's really important to be able to kind of revisit and retrain, make sure that you're hammering down on the really important things for the organization.
Yeah. I think before we get to the next slide, I think one other thing I'd like to call out is too much content. I mean, I think that's probably something every enablement leader has to struggle with, because if you're not actually getting that as a problem, that means you don't have enough content. But it's either one or the other. You don't have enough or you have too much. And I imagine as a rep, which we'll talk about later, like how the hell do you remember all that content so you can really do your job as well as possible? I think the last time I checked, none of us are chat GPT bots trying to run through the sales process automatically. So this is great. Let's jump to the next slide. So, I mean, look, it's great talking with a company like Abnormal Security. I think congrats to, first of all, your success, to your company's success. I mean, obviously you're doing something right when you have a good problem where you're trying to triple, where you have been tripling the size of your sales team over the last 2-3 years, like you said. But I think outside of that last slide, I mean, from your perspective, like, what are some things that you see that are currently working today as it relates to enablement and even like the correlation between enablement and RevOps or sales ops and like what's what's painful, what could be better?
Yeah, I mean, like I said, one of the key objectives for me is to have a well-defined, repeatable process. I think we did that really well. We defined our process. We've documented it. We have supporting content. We've aligned our systems to support our sellers through that process. What's been a struggle in the past is enforcing that, right? Enforcing that process, because we didn't just build it to build it. Like, we want people to actually follow that playbook, right? And so ensuring that sales is always using the, to your point, if you're not if you're not creating enough content, you're not going to have that content problem. But ensuring that sales is always using the latest and greatest content that you put together for them.
Yeah, I can relate to that too, right? I know from an enablement perspective, myself, the community, right? We're spending a lot of time, energy, maybe even money, building really great content, building really great training programs. Are the reps consuming the content at the right time? Are they retaining that content? I mean, is it safe to say like that's basically the status quo at the end of the day, and there has to be a better way?
Yeah, I think so.
All right, so let's jump to the next slide. I mean, let's think about it really from the perspective of a rep. Like, what does the day in the life of a rep at Abnormal Security look like, and how are they being proactive versus reactive, in that status quo, especially when it comes to like optimizing their pipeline, optimizing at the end of the day the ability to really close out as many deals as possible and mark that deal as a closed one at the end of the month, at the end of the quarter, and to do that repeatably and at scale.
Yeah. Well, I love the image here on the left of the packed calendar, because I really feel like that's the average week for a lot of our sellers, right? They're having so many different types of meetings, whether that's with a prospect and they're kind of early on and having that first meeting, or they're getting into a technical call, or they're, later stage in the negotiation process, different steps to cover at each meeting there, right? Or, if they're dealing with a current customer and they're talking about a renewal or an expansion play, there's multiple playbooks. On top of that, I think, in the market that we're in, there's just a greater need to be more data oriented and to manage your business off of that data. And so I think there's an increasing amount of requirements on our sales reps to justify their opportunities, tighter requirements from their managers for regular updates and next steps on their deals. And so if there's any sales reps on the call, I'm sure this resonates with them. It could be really overwhelming, and you have to be really disciplined to stay on top of it.
So, I think we started this webinar talking about like empathy, right? And, I think to everyone on the webinar, like this isn't like just some random screenshot we found on Google. Like this is an actual screenshot of a rep's calendar, but we obviously blurred it out for privacy reasons. But if a rep is doing what they're supposed to be doing, and they have like 4 or 5 meetings a day back to back with different prospects or customers, like I think going back to like, I'm thinking about that word cloud, and the biggest thing on that word cloud was data hygiene. Like, is there really an expectation that at the end of the day, like they're retaining just even the meetings that they had, and the small things that happened during the meeting, the big things that they happened during that meeting, and really updating their opportunity accordingly, based on just even what happened at the end of that day, if they literally had like 5, 6, 7 meetings that day.
Yeah, and I'd add on top of that, Tom, I mean, like if they are going through those steps after each meeting, they're definitely not prepared for their next meeting. And so I think there's going to be equally a missed opportunity as they're going into their next call, where they're not putting their best foot forward. And no matter how good your solution is at that point, you're going to lose accountability with your customer and credibility.
If they're not doing that, it's creating, I guess, unnecessary risk to the deal potentially, and they could just screw up the deal just based on that lack of data quality or hygiene in Salesforce. I guess that maybe there's a missed opportunity for other leaders or even their frontline manager to help strategize and think about what next steps are with that particular account or logo is, so we can remove risk out of the equation, maximize the opportunity. Do you feel like that's typically the case?
100%. Yeah.
Interesting. So let's jump to the next slide. We're going to talk about reactive versus proactive. What does this mean, I guess, from an ops perspective, from an enablement perspective? So, in your words, Mark, how do you look at being proactive with your reps, or how do you enable your reps to be proactive, specifically within the accounts and opportunities and leads that they're managing, whether they're like an SDR or ADR from a business development perspective, or as an AE, just doing what they can to get that deal to closed one, or even on the CS side of the house where, look, this is the beauty about SaaS. I'm not leaving SaaS anytime soon, right? It's all about not just the new revenue, but how do we retain and grow and expand our existing revenue?
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'd say, I like to say, giving them what they need when they need it, right? And whether that is meeting preparation or follow-up email templates for your post-meeting call, or tools to prepare for a competitive proof of value, or generating a mutual action plan with your customer, delivering those things when it's relevant to them. So, if they're coming into a first meeting call, delivering them a view of who are they talking to, like why was this call set up, right? What campaign did this lead come in from? Do we have any notes of where they came from, whether that's from marketing or from your SDR? Basically getting the person ready for that call. And then maybe if you have like a first meeting deck presentation and you want to make sure that they're using not the one that they saved on their laptop, but using the latest and greatest deck that you worked really hard to put together, pushing that to them right before their meeting so they're prepared and they can put their best foot forward.
So you talked about this concept of delivering, but like, what does that really mean, right? Because I think for anyone, especially on this webinar, that doesn't have the context yet of what Rattle is or solves for, I mean, I'm sure they're thinking like, well, they can just get what they want by accessing Salesforce, or they can get what they want by maybe accessing their LMS, or I imagine a lot of companies have a lot of great content or playbooks like in Google Drive or Dropbox, or in some type of file repository system somewhere in the cloud, right? Where the expectation is for the rep to just click on it, access it, and then do their job. So like, let's double click further. What does that actually mean in your world? Like what did the reps experience today actually when we're talking about proactive enablement, specifically within abnormal security?
Sure. Yeah, that's a fair question. I mean, we've got a pretty good content repository set up, and of course, an AE could go into that repository and go find the content to prepare for that meeting. And you could surface that content in Salesforce, but in both those methods, it puts the onus on the seller to go and find that content. And so there's some searching involved, and which takes more time, but it's also they have to be behind their desks to do that. And we know a lot of sellers are out on the road. They're taking meetings from the road. They're meeting with partners. They're meeting with customers. And so they're not always in the best place to access your content repository. So what are we doing today? We are literally messaging them before their meeting. And you could do it in different increments. You could do it at the beginning of the day. You could do it an hour before. We set ours up a couple hours before their meeting, but they basically get a notification in their Slack. It gives them the context of what we know about that meeting. And then we provide links directly to the things that they'll need to be successful. So again, if it's the first meeting, here's a link to your first meeting deck. If we're going into a POV planning session, okay, here's kind of a document to walk you through how to set success criteria, build a mutual action plan with your customer. These are the things that we're trying to do to just cut out, the little things that make it hard for a sales rep to prepare for their day, and make it really, really easy for them so they're successful in their meetings.
Yeah, that's interesting, right? So if I can paraphrase with what you've just said, you're basically taking data, or maybe that lack of data from Salesforce among like other systems you're using, and then pushing that back into, I guess, Slack, right? That's where your reps live and breathe at the end of the day.
Exactly. And they could do it on their phone too.
Yeah. So what does that mean like for the rep? I'm sure you've spoken to many reps within Abnormal. What are they telling you when they're getting pinged on Slack from, I know, the Rattle bot, right? And it's, hey, you have this upcoming meeting. Here are the notes, or here's the context to help you prepare. Or, hey, it's been, an hour or a day after your meeting, and the next steps or the notes field isn't up to date yet. So log in and update away. Like, how is this impacting them? And then I'll follow that up with, how is it impacting you and your sales leaders?
Our feedback has been through the roof, really positive. And I'd say for like our more tenured experienced sellers, a majority of them are like, hey, I know the steps, right? I know what I need to do, but still it's good to get that reminder. And so sometimes it's just the little things like the hygiene of, hey, we're going to Slack you after a meeting. We're going to ask you to update your next steps in your meeting notes. Oh, thank you. That made it really easy for me to go and do that versus having to go into Salesforce, find my opportunity, go find the fields on this exhaustive page layout and update everything that I would have updated. So we make it basically at the click of a button, and it just makes it really easy for them. Plus it reminds them if they were to forget. For our newer sellers, we do those onboarding sessions. We might spend a couple hours with the AEs, in those first few days, just kind of walking them through operational training. But, again, if you're anything like me, you might take in like 10% of what's being said in those trainings.
Yeah.
And so this is just reinforcing that, right? We are reminding them of, here are the expectations, here are the requirements that we've set for you. And they love it. It's their daily digest, right? Of, I just go and follow up on these things, and I know that I am taking the right steps to kind of pave my path for success.
So, for you as like a RevOps and an enablement leader, for your CRO, or for the person that's like owning like your head of sales, your head of revenue, your CRO, your CSO, like, how is it impacting them at the end of the day by essentially creating this like proactive enablement capability within your sales process?
Yeah, I think again, it builds accountability with our leaders, right? They know that we're giving our sales team the tool and to be successful, and we're kind of paving that path for them. And so really there's no excuses on the sales side. A sales rep can't say, well, I didn't really know to do that, because we're telling them, and we're constantly telling them. And if they forget to do it again, like, we go back and we tell them again. So I think there's like a big accountability aspect to it.
Yeah.
And then, it's driving better hygiene, it's driving better data, and they're seeing the outcome of that in the reports and dashboards, the analytics and KPIs that we've put together for them.
You feel like, they're potentially a little bit happier at the end of the day, a little bit stressed out. Maybe the CEO or the board is, they feel like there's more trust and validation with the numbers that's being reported back to them.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. And I think, to that point, it keeps them really tied into like what's happening real time. And so like, we have specific alerts where if some things get updated within CRM from Rattle, that they get that notification right away, and it comes in through Rattle. They can see, here's a focus deal for the quarter. Here's kind of like your, what we would call a market maker type of deal. And this is a pretty like impactful change to that deal, and we can let them know right away. So, they're not caught off guard in the next forecast call, but they can proactively reach out to, the manager, the seller, and get more details if needed.
That's awesome. I see a question from Lori. I'm going to actually jump to the next slide. and then ask her question back to you, Mark. But I think for anyone else on the webinar, if you have questions, feel free to start pushing them, and I'll try to get through them as we go along. But I think the next slide is going to create that, I don't know if I'm allowed to curse or not, but I'm just going to do it anyway. Like that, oh shit moment where it's like, holy crap, I think we should have done something like this sooner. And like, why didn't we know about this? Why didn't my leaders know about this? And that's okay. Take full credit for this and then get promoted. But let's jump to the next slide, because this is really what it looks like at the end of the day. So, this is one, and again, this was like the big theme, one of the big bubbles from the word cloud about process adherence. So Mark, do you want to just like talk about like what this rattle is in the context of like a rep getting this in Slack, and what is it that we're actually driving or doing at the end of the day?
Yeah, I'd say for us, this has been a big game changer, because every organization I've been at, you have your stages that kind of become a bit of a parking lot, right? And they're usually early on in the sales cycle, and there could be an opportunity there. They could have a pain that you could fix. They could have the right players involved, but a lot of the time, they're missing a next step. It gets a little bit stale. And it needs something to kind of help progress to the next stage, right? It needs something to bring that customer back in, to help re-engage and to set that next meeting. And so some of the things that we're doing on our side is talking to the sellers who have been really successful in converting their opportunities and pushing through those gate stages where we sometimes see people have trouble, and we ask them for their best tips and tricks of how do they do that? How do they set that next meeting? And so our enablement team has put together some repeatable content that we can push out to some of our other sellers. And we do that on opportunities that are stuck in stages. We message people, hey, we notice you have an opportunity. It's been in here for 2 weeks. You don't have a next meeting date. You don't have a next step. Here are some things that you might be able to do to kind of re-engage with that customer and get the ball rolling again. And it's been really effective.
So this goes to Lori. So she's one of the participants on this webinar. So if a rep is getting this, have any of them shared with you about like Slack fatigue? Like would a rep say like, hey, this is spammy or noisy and I actually want this anymore, like stop rattle for me?
There's been a bit of that. I mean, I'd say there's a couple of things I could say to that. One is everything comes into that rattle application, right? We do a lot of direct messaging to their rattle applications. So if they really want to ignore it, they can ignore it. Some of our AEs will use it, they'll let it be until the end of the day when they're ready to go and make those updates, and they'll come in and they'll just use it as a digest. Let me go through one by one and I'm going to make the appropriate updates to these deals. But we have gotten that feedback, and actually we did an optimization of our rattle alerts probably about 2 months ago, and we decided we needed to reprioritize. So we took those that were really relevant and said, okay, these are your more like real-time, everyday alerts that we need people to take action now, versus here are alerts that are, hey, if it gets updated tomorrow, it's not a big deal. And so we put them in cadences that we staggered through the week. You could do similar things like that. You can also throttle your alerts, in terms of like attributes, right? You could define which opportunities to send an alert on, and which ones you don't want to. And so they could be built in any dynamic way that you can imagine, and it gives you a lot of freedom.
Yeah. I mean, look, this excites me, right? And I think for the enablement leaders on this call, or if you're watching this on demand, what I really like, especially about this one, it's like think about the empowerment that a rep is getting, because unless they're logging into Salesforce, and I know it's hard in Salesforce to create like a report or a dashboard of like which opportunities have been stuck in whatever stages for whatever period of time, and you have to decipher and filter through all that data. But like in this example here, like it's very clear to me if I'm a sales rep, like, hey, I have an opportunity with this logo. I've been stuck in the stage for more than 30 days. I should probably do something about it. Do I need more enablement training? And then I can create a custom button and link to that enablement content. Or is it as simple as like, look, I forgot to update the stage, right? Every rep is guilty of that, even the best one. So do I just need to move it to the next stage and progress the deal along? Or, you know what? I did do a discovery with them. It was, we both mutually understood like we're not a good fit for each other at this time, and that's okay. So let me just get rid of this bullshit pipeline, mark it as closed lost, and move on. Because the last thing I want is another alert like this, or just to have this on top of mind when I could focus my time and energy and focus on the rest of my pipeline.
Right. Yeah, qualify out just as much as you're qualifying these opportunities in.
Do you feel like a rattle like this also impacts the relationship like with your frontline managers and their reps? Like how would a frontline manager, maybe leverage this, maybe, in terms of coaching and next steps?
Yeah, I think, it's a really good question. We haven't used, I would say this is more on like the hygiene side for us, and we don't normally escalate to our managers. We did have some escalation rattles that we will send like at the end of the week if things have gone way past when they should have been mitigated. I would say that to kind of go back to the original question of Slack alert or Slack fatigue, we give our AEs other ways to look at some of these more hygiene related issues and to mitigate those issues outside of rattle. And so I think that if they are getting hit with a lot of rattle alerts, it's because they're not doing the things that we've defined for them, the requirements that they've defined for them. And so for the managers, it's like we're really only messaging the sellers when these things come up, and they come up over and over and over again. And so for them, it might be reacting to the fact that you've got a seller who really just isn't doing the right things, right? They're not taking the steps that we need them to take in Salesforce. And so that would be a point of escalation where they might have a conversation with that seller.
Yeah, look, I love that. Because, even when I look back in my, career and when I was a frontline manager, it's hard having, you want all of your sellers to be better than the week before. And so like, what am I focusing my time and energy during that one-on-one meeting? I think maybe the status quo is like, hey, let's just review your top 3 or 5 ops for the month and let's just get those closed. But I imagine for like a lot of frontline managers and even for the reps too, right? Like, how am I consciously thinking about like how long each and every open up has been in whatever stage for whatever period of time? Like, that's like just an impossible ask. Of course, I think there's like a best practice and maybe some like high level training, like, hey, across all the closed won deals, we see reps typically spending at least 15 days in discovery. Great. But like, that's not something you're like conscious of each and every day when you're a seller. So when I see this rattle, what it says to me is like, crap, I need to do something. But if I don't get this rattle, if I don't get this notification, then I'm not empowered to make any choice. And then I think for everybody on the call, imagine that they're having a deal that's been stuck in a stage or been in a stage for 15 days, 30 days, 45 days, 60 days. Is this even really a deal at that point? What could we have done differently, right? That proactive philosophy of intervening and de-risking the deal in real time. So I love that. Let's jump to the next slide and get your thoughts there. De-risking the first call. So do you want to take the lead on this, Mark?
Sure. Yeah. I love this one because our marketing operations team actually set up a really cool web form that populates all of our new business opportunities, where if that first meeting is generated on behalf of an AE by one of our SDRs, we want to be able to prep them for that call as much as possible. And so our SDRs are taking notes. They've developed a potential buyer, a prospect to contact. There's details of where, how this prospect came to us, what campaign brought them in. And so our marketing ops team built this web form, which we link in a rattle alert that goes out to these sales reps to give them all the context on everything they could need to prepare for that first meeting. And we've gotten really good feedback. This is something that we've actually rolled out to only specific teams right now, and we're looking to push this out worldwide. But it's gotten really good feedback, and it's been really helpful for getting our sellers ready for their first meeting demos.
If you didn't have Rattle, how would they then do this? Like, what would be the status quo or the normal way? And how do you feel like that is just as good as this? Like, what's your take there?
Yeah, I mean, I think the simple answer is they'd have to go into Salesforce, find that opportunity, know that that opportunity is linked to the meeting that's on their calendar. So there's, it's kind of like relating the meeting on your calendar to, okay, I got to go find the opportunity record, and now I've got to go look for all these pertinent fields and details, and I've got to kind of put the pieces together before my call. So we're consolidating that, we're making it easier, and then we're delivering it to them when it's relevant for them to prepare for their call.
Yeah. And what kind of enablement are you providing in real time? So I think in this example, it's like a prep page, but I imagine you could do a lot in terms of like the initial call with the prospect. So how are you approaching that?
Yeah, it's that web form, that Marketo web form that we put together, and honestly, like you can handle that within the details of the message too, but I think the web form just gives you like a briefing. And if you really wanted to, you could also print that out and have it with you right before your call. The other thing we're pushing is the first meeting deck. And then we've got some buttons that allow them to update. Potentially that meeting gets pushed and they need to push that meeting date on the opportunity record, or they need to update the stage or add some notes to it. So we give them some quick access links to update their opportunity directly from Rattle.
I gotta ask, like, is there like dozens and dozens of like variants of the first call deck that exist?
And people's laptops, yeah, unfortunately. And I think we still see some stuff that, a manager will jump on a call and say, I saw, a first meeting deck that was versioned from like 2 years ago. And so it's a constant battle, but I think with this type of flow, right, you're always pushing that deck to them. And so there's really not the need to save it on your laptop, and this way they always have the latest and greatest.
Yeah, I know reps and even frontline managers, right? Like they struggle with, hey, am I actually, whether they struggle with it or not, right? But I think they always have the question, am I using the latest and greatest content? And I know, like from a marketing and an enablement perspective, it's like, hey, we've published the latest and greatest content. How can we now make sure that our reps and our frontline managers are actively using it or proactively using it versus, whatever's been saved or copied into their Google Drive or on their laptop. So I love this because you can always now make sure that whoever's getting the rattle feels and knows that they will always have access to whatever is that source of truth, and the latest source of truth, not something that scares the crap out of me, but I've seen it firsthand as a view, like something that's like a year old or 2 years old.
Yeah.
All right, let's jump to the next one. I love this one. Reinforce existing training. So what does this mean to you, Mark? How is this impacting your company?
Yeah, I feel a bit like a broken record. I mean, this is like Rattle in a nutshell, right?
Yeah.
You've already pushed out the onboarding. You've taken somebody through, all those training sessions that you've set up when you brought them in. This is just the reminders. It's everything that we've talked about so far, right? Where we are just pushing the most relevant and recent topics to the AE, regardless of the stage they're in on that account or that opportunity, and surfacing that, hopefully when they need that content. And so it's going to be a lot quicker and easier for them to digest.
Yeah, I love this because especially for those of you that are on the call, I mean, think about what kind of content you would want to send to your rep or to your manager based on like what data or trigger that they're inputting into Salesforce. So like, I think in this example here, if a rep is entering a discount into the product book in Salesforce or whatever CRM you're using, more than 10%, like that's actually a really good trigger to send them this like negotiations training. Maybe we need to resend to that rep, like, hey, this is what we captured with Medic or Spiced or whatever the methodology is that you're using. I think a lot of reps and managers need to be reminded that, we're not using a sales methodology because it's fun, right? It helps us quantify the deal, de-risk the deal. But if especially the situation and the pain of the impact, that actually gives you more control over your pricing and your value proposition, especially if you have the prospect has a critical or compelling event coming up. That's what I'm trying to do, at least with my reps here at Rattle, because we want, of course, we want everyone to work smarter, not harder. If you're doing a 50% discount, and I get it, sometimes you need to do what you got to do to win the deal, but now you got to work 50% harder if you're trying to hit a specific target or a quota for yourself or your team or for the company. So yeah, this is, imagine what you would send to a rep that's doing a 10% discount versus maybe a 40% discount. Is it the same type of training and negotiations content? Is it something different? Hopefully I'm getting some gears churning on this webinar. Anything else you want to add, Mark?
No, I just say, like when we talk about discounting, we are also driving our approvals via Rattle. And I'll tell you, like, it's been a game changer for our managers to be able to approve directly in Slack when they're on the road. It's been really easy for them and nothing but great feedback.
What would be the status quo? Were they using Chatter before?
Email approvals, yeah.
Yeah.
Like our CRO loves the Rattle approvals because you just click a button and go. So
And I'm curious, like, does your CRO react differently if he's being asked to approve of a deal that maybe is a higher discount than he normally would just approve without batting an eye?
no, I usually at that point he has questions, right? And that's the other benefit, right? You're already in Slack, so you can easily forward that message to the AE or to the RD and get more context.
Awesome. So that means everybody's collaborating now, everybody's being transparent with each other, everybody's getting to make faster business decisions.
Yep.
Speed, then it's about speed to actually generating, I guess, the order form or the quote and sending it off to your prospect.
Yeah.
Awesome.
I can't tell you how many times I get AEs reaching out asking me to approve for one of our leaders, and that just isn't going to happen. So it makes it a lot easier.
Yeah. Look, I've worked at companies where the approval process was like via email or via Chatter.
Yeah.
And especially at the end of the quarter, it felt absolutely painful because what the rep or the frontline manager would end up doing was just slacking the CRO anyway.
Yep.
hey, can you please log into Salesforce and approve this, or log into Chatter, or like look at your email and approve this. So if everybody's living and breathing in Slack or Teams to begin with, like, boom, let's get shit done here, right? Let me see. I think another question's coming up. I will answer that question near the end. But that's a good one. Let's jump into this one. How about when it comes to like your engineering team, your product team, and Abnormal Security has a killer product, but how are you enabling, like what's the context in this case when the rep needs to also be enabled, like maybe from a product perspective?
I'd say this is definitely something we could probably do a better job at. It's a really good call out. I think about when new features get released, we have like an hour-long call for a sales all hands where we dedicate to that feature release, and here's what pricing looks like. And you go through like 10 different topics in that hour, and you just jam it all in, and you hope to God that everybody knows what's going on and how to sell that new feature and cater it to your customer. And so I feel like Rattle is a force multiplier with that, right? Because you're going to end that call and you're going to send out content, and maybe you hope your AEs go to find that content when a deal comes up that's relevant to that feature or that product. We do have some alerts set up that are not based off of the products being added, but based off of the pain points, and we relate content to those pain points of here's a feature that could solve that pain. And I think that's a really similar use case. It's taking that same content that we pushed out during those enablement sessions, during that very jam-packed hour call, and we're now resurfacing that when a seller actually needs those details. And so this is definitely, it's a very good call out, and it's something that I'm going to take back with me and probably build some better Rattle alerts around it. But it's a good use case.
Yeah, this is it's interesting, right? Because I also need to do this too. I know this is a webinar for an enablement within the Rattle product, but we also launched yesterday because we're just going like a million miles per hour, our new meeting intelligence product, where Rattle now connects to Gong, and we can actually summarize those meetings and then push the summary back into Slack. So maybe, Mark, if you're interested, we'll probably have to upsell you on this. No
Yes.
discount. But for a rep, it's like, hey, if the prospect is interested in that product, from my perspective in enablement, I want to enable them like, hey, here's the persona content as it relates to the product. Here are the discovery questions you can ask as it relates to the product. Here's the pricing and marketing materials like one-pagers or Google Slides or whatever to help you push this product to the next stage. And look, maybe the content is different at the discovery stage versus maybe the POC or POV stage or the proposal stage. So again, you can get pretty crazy pretty quickly. But for everybody that's on the webinar, think about it from a proactive standpoint versus hoping and praying that your reps are actually going to seek out and find this content, if they can find it, wherever this content resides within your company's infrastructure. Let's talk about everboarding. All right. So I think enablement people are beaten up to death on onboarding. I think as an industry, I'll just speak on behalf of all enablement people. I think we know what we're doing when it comes to onboarding. But what about like everboarding? How is your company approaching this?
Yeah, when I think about everboarding, for me, it's the continuation of like onboarding for existing AEs, right? And even for our more tenured AEs who have been around for a while. And our processes are changing, and this could be just as complicated, if not more complicated, than a new seller coming on board, because now you're taking somebody who's who's been through the previous motion and just got used to that, and you're trying to change that behavior and get them to buy in on this new and improved playbook or sales motion. And so again, like we treat a lot of our sellers in the same way, whether they're new or existing. We're always surfacing the same content to our sellers, and it creates a motion where we are constantly like onboarding and training and giving them the tools that they need to be more successful.
Love it. We did get a question from someone, which I'll take because I think it definitely relates to this. The question is, how are you tracking LMS training content in Rattle if they viewed it? To simply answer that question, Rattle does track engagement in terms of how many clicks or views that the Rattle notification or signal has appeared to the rep. But like what you really want to measure as an enablement leader is not how many times do they click on the button to the enablement content or the LMS content, but even within the LMS platform itself, whatever you're using, right? That's going to be your real source of truth in terms of, hey, how many times did my rep view the course or complete the course? So think about it from an enablement perspective of like, hey, in this context, new product was released a week ago. Did you complete the product training course in the LMS? If not, here's the link to it. Or, hey, here are the discovery questions you can ask as it relates to the product. If you want to use Bitly, you can. Or if you want to just look at the analytics, whether those discovery questions live in Google Sheets, Google Slides, whatever, those tools provide analytics as well. But Rattle also has those analytics. So there's multiple ways to do it, but I think the advice I would give to to our participant here is you want to look at if it's LMS content, you want to look at the LMS itself to give you the analytics and confirmation you need that someone, let's say like Tom Cherian, actually took and completed the course. So let's just like wrap up, and then we're going to open it up to Q&A. So if you have questions, feel free to ask now. But I think for everyone here on the call, I want you to think about like where are those opportunities that you can start optimizing today, right? As it relates to your sales process, as it relates to your sales or revenue enablement practice, right? We kind of led today talking about reactive enablement versus proactive enablement. So what can you do today to start being proactive with your reps? Right. And think about the systems of record that they're using, like Salesforce, Gong, whatever tools, how can you ensure that they're getting the right data or the right insights at the right time so that they can make better decisions throughout their sales process, right? Literally within the opportunity. Now, look, I'm an enablement leader. I think the majority of you are enablement leaders. Of course, we need to still do things like role playing, pitching, the traditional things that help people get confident and get the feedback that they need so that they are doing those things well. But if a rep has a deal stuck in stage for 30 days, how are you helping that person out? Or, hey, a person just added a new product into the opportunity. How are you making sure? How are you giving your CRO the confidence that that rep has the access to the latest and greatest content for that product, for the stage that they're in? And once you've figured those things out, start mapping it out. Throw it in a Google Sheet. Doesn't have to be sexy, but start thinking and start building. If you have questions, feel free to ping me. Mark might be a good resource too, but I don't want to have millions of people pinging Mark. But I mean, feel free to at least connect with us on LinkedIn. I love asking and answering questions from the community. And if you feel like Rattle is a good solution or fit, I mean, please check us out. I think what you'll find, and this was the biggest reason why I decided to join Rattle, was there is no other solution like this. This is a completely new category. This is a completely new problem that we're solving. And Mark, I just got to ask, like, what would it mean to you if you didn't have Rattle tomorrow?
I would at least need a team twice the size to chase down all the hygiene issues we'd be dealing with, all the process issues that we'd be dealing with. It's it's a force multiplier for us, and it's been incredible.
Do you feel like it's giving Abnormal Security a competitive advantage?
Yeah, I mean, in terms of just like internally how we manage our process, and how we prepare for our meetings, and just putting our best foot forward when we're on calls with our prospects and our customers, I'd say absolutely. I know from the feedback from our sales reps that they love the things that we're doing, and a lot of them have said that this is some of the best systems and process that they've seen in their careers. So I feel pretty lucky to be a part of it, and to be able to take credit for rolling out tools like Rattle has been great for me.
I love it. That's such great feedback. If you have a question, again, whip out your phone, whip out your iPad, whatever device you're using that has a camera on it, scan the code, or you can just type in the code manually at slido.com, and we'll share these questions live in front of everyone. But I did get one or two questions from the webinar chat. So first question is, I'm just going last upward. Can we integrate HighSpot with Rattle to push content to sellers, or can Rattle host content to share with customers? So I'll answer that since it's more of a product question. Rattle doesn't actually host any content. We do connect to different systems of records. So I think in the case with HighSpot, if the content is already hosted in HighSpot and you have those unique links within HighSpot, what I would do is think about, okay, what kind of trigger are we creating? Maybe it's a rep adding a competitor to the opportunity. Maybe it's a rep staying in a stage longer than they should be. Maybe it's a rep by the time they get to, let's say, the POC stage, there's only one contact in the opportunity. Maybe they should be multi-threaded. Maybe we need to make sure that we're getting and sending to them some multi-threaded training content, or whatever the context is. And if that asset, if that content, if that video is in HighSpot or wherever else, you can, I'm just going to jump here, but you can like literally link to the content. So all of this is custom. The other thing I'll call out, because it's not necessarily obvious, but you can also have reps update fields from Rattle back into Salesforce. So there is this bi-directional capability with Rattle. So something to think about too, right? If the rep's stuck in stage for more than 30 days and you want to make it easy for them to make an action, hey, they can update this stage here directly within Slack, mark the deal as closed lost, or move it to the next stage, or update the next steps, because clearly this has not been filled out in this example. So there's many things to do. And I think that's also part of the value proposition of working really with the customer success team at Rattle, right? We can take that collective wisdom from Mark and the hundreds of other clients that we're working with and literally share with you, like, what are other companies doing? What are other clients doing? And enable you right off the bat with some of those best practices. Other questions? The next question are, what are all the integrations that are required to get this going? That's a good question. At the very least, first of all, check our website for our latest and greatest in integrations. But today we support Salesforce and HubSpot. And in terms of the communication platform where your reps are living and breathing in, that's Teams, Microsoft Teams, or Slack. Now there's other systems we connect to, like Gong. So we can actually push not only like, hey, the call happened and here's the link to the Gong recording, but now we can actually summarize those meetings. So yes, we are using ChatGPT. And yes, it's not just a meeting summary, but it's feedback on what the rep did well, feedback on what the rep could have done better, and really helping multiple folks that want to see that opportunity closed understand like what happened during the meeting, what didn't happen during the meeting, so everyone can de-risk and strategize what we need to do next. And you're doing that directly in Slack, which is great. I see one person here. Other questions? Feel free to post. What kind of pre-effort is needed to set up Rattle? I mean, Mark, were you involved in the initial purchase and implementation of Rattle?
Yeah, absolutely.
How long did it take for you to get your first Rattle? To really see value?
Yeah, so there was some there's some canned alerts that were set up pretty much immediately, and you could think about, just like, what are the hygiene things off the top of your head? That's probably the low hanging fruit. So opportunities with close dates in the past, opportunities missing next steps, opportunities where you're past a specific meeting date or point in the timeline that you feel like you should have progressed to the next stage. Those are incredibly simple to set up. I mean, they take minutes, and it's just deciding on the cadence and how you want to deliver them. Like, do you want them to go direct to the opportunity owner? Do you want them to go to an account team? Do you want it to be posted in a channel? There's a lot of little things that you can do to kind of like dynamically set that up for your own internal use cases. But again, like, all the paths are really quick. I think the hardest thing is just defining what you want to do, and communicating that with your sellers and their managers, and then figuring out, like, you don't want to set up like 2,000 workflows where they're getting pinged every 2 seconds. Like, you do want to be smart about it and make sure you're prioritizing the alerts, but it's very simple and very quick to set up.
Yeah, I think if I can be PC about it, I think if we did charge like an implementation fee, our clients would feel ripped off, because the time to value after you purchase it, it's like literally within minutes, you're creating your first Rattle. So yeah, within the first day of using Rattle, you can literally be up and running. When I started out Rattle a few months ago, I was a little bit intimidated. I'm like, crap, I got to learn this new tool, this new platform. But literally within minutes, I was creating my first enablement workflows within Rattle, at Rattle, or for Rattle. And yeah, the time to value is pretty damn quick. Like, there is no professional services needed. You don't need to work with a third-party vendor. If I can make the comparison, it's probably just as easy as Zoom. And I think we're past time. So again, to everyone that's on the webinar, thank you so much for attending. Have a great rest of your day. If you have any questions or comments, ping Rattle, ping one of us on the panel. We're more than happy to help. And on that note, have a happy and safe week. And thank you again for your time today. And thank you, Mark, for joining us.
Thanks, Tom. Thanks, everyone.